Matt just put an interesting question into the chat as well that I know you'll get into later on, Salim. But
Oh, let me open the chat window. I use Tome for Drupal 8 and Drupal 9, but Tome is not available for Drupal 7. Curious what Drupal. That is a very good question. And I know that there are some like companies and universities out there with hundreds, even thousands of Drupal 7 sites out there. So I'll cover that in a few minutes. Yeah, as we go through this. So and in fact, that's what we begin with. Is there's 550,000 Drupal 7 sites out there. And what do you do with these sites, right? What are your options? So you can upgrade them to Drupal 9 or Backdrop, right? But that's expensive and time consuming. You can buy extended support, and that can get expensive. It's not community supported. And there's not full coverage for all the modules and for all the sites. So that's something to understand. You can, and then the other option is to convert your site to static sites. So you can stay on Drupal 7, which is the cheapest, the easiest option, and you convert your live site to the static site, and you bring your dynamic site behind the firewall. So you're still on the Drupal 7 site, you just bring it behind the firewall, and then you make the static site public facing. Then it becomes secure, it's fast, it's scalable. You update the content on the dynamic site as needed, and then you create new versions of your static site as needed. So as you update the content. And then you can actually internally, you can disable the dynamic Drupal 7 site when you're not using 100% secure, but at least it's disabled, so it cannot be, essentially it cannot be hacked while it's not running. So even internally it cannot be hacked while it's not running. So those are the key. That's what we call the tool chain that you can build for static sites, for managing your Drupal 7 sites if you have a bunch of those. So this is what a dynamic site looks like generally, and you've got your database, your PHP engine running on a server, and we spend a lot of time optimizing these sites using Varnish, Memcache, and caching and things like that. And ultimately, what they do is they generate HTML pages, which is then served to the users. Static sites do something similar, but everything's pre-generated. They live in a CDN, content delivery network, and they're just serving the pre-built HTML pages. So this is what a static site is. You might have heard of Headless and sites and things like that. It's where you're using Drupal as a service, and you've got your own backend and front end serving your website. So we're not going to be talking about building a headless infrastructure today. We're just going to be talking about something like this, where you're still managing your whole Drupal site in the background, and you can still update your Drupal site. You can still manage your dev, test, stage, workflow in the background behind your firewall, and then you can click some buttons and publish the live site as a static site. So this is the static site workflow and toolchain that we'll talk about today. Does that make sense? Any questions up till now? And with this workflow, the benefit of this workflow is that you can go back and you can disable. Once the static site is published, you can easily disable everything that's behind the firewall. And that gets you some security. And you can disable it, or you can even delete it if you don't want it anymore. So that's the big benefit of having this type of tool chain. I would say delete it or archive it. So benefits of static sites in in general, performance. Dynamic sites will take time to load. Generally, take time to load. Static sites are super fast. The time to first byte for static sites are generally close to 0 seconds. And if you look at how long people wait for site loads, it's usually less than 5 seconds. For security, we keep seeing PHP vulnerabilities, MySQL vulnerabilities, Drupal vulnerabilities, zero-day attacks on all of these things, even operating systems, things like that. And with static sites, we're removing over 99% of the attack surface. And if you're using an architecture like this, static sites, right? You can actually run a static site off your server as well. If you're doing that, you need to manage the operating system on that server. But if you use something like S3 and AWS CDN, then you don't even have to manage the operating system on that. AWS takes care of all that, right? So depending on how you're managing your static sites and how you're architecting it, you don't have to. It becomes totally serverless to set this up. If you're concerned about security and compliance with static sites, you can set up WAF and shield protection. And I'm talking AWS through AWS. Some of this terminology is through AWS because that's where we do a lot of work. But WAF is your web application firewall, so you can set that up on static sites as well. You can set up DDoS protection, HTTPS, all these things work on static sites as well. You can set up access control on the files that are used for static sites as well. For compliance, static sites will work for PCI compliance, HIPAA, ISO 9000, SOC, and so on, right? FedRAMP and so on. So static sites will do compliance and are good for security as well. Goes down tremendously. So your engineering, maintenance, support, and so on, you've still got this. So you're not like for generating static site, if you're maintaining this, then you're still maintaining this, and you might still have the maintenance cost for maintaining this. But if you disable this, then you're not incurring ongoing cost for this. Performance on static sites, and upgrades you don't have to worry about on static sites. And this really comes into play especially for Drupal 7 sites that are being deprecated. And if you're doing hosting if you're doing hosting on some of the popular hosting platforms, you're probably paying for page views today. I don't even understand how they calculate on page views. So with static sites, you're not paying for page views. You're essentially paying for the traffic that you're getting and the traffic that you're serving. So that becomes very affordable that way. Okay, some tools. So if you want to build a tool chain like this, your backend You can manage this internally. You can manage this on one of the hosting companies that you're using currently. And you can still have your dev test stage workflow on the back end behind the firewall, and where you're publishing the live site beyond the firewall as a public site. So if you want to do this, there's a bunch of tools that are out there. You can use, there's a thing called Druxt.js, and that can generate static site. It's built on Nuxt. There's version of Gatsby that will run, that you can use with Drupal as well. There's a Drupal module for that. There's Next.js version for Drupal. There's Tome for Drupal, that's very popular. And this and some of these you'll have to build like a headless architecture for this as well. There's QuantCDN. And then there's, for Drupal 7, especially, there's a lot of these things will do Drupal 8 and above. For Drupal 7, and especially, there's things like open source tools like httrack and wget. And around forever. And these work on not just Drupal 7, but also 8, 9, WordPress, and other things as well. So these are things that I'll put a link to one of the presentations someone had done on wget and how it's being used. It can be used. And this is one for Tome. This is from Tome documentation. Over Pantheon, you can, if you have your site hosted on Pantheon or Acquia, you can take your site, put it behind, unpublish the site there, and then you can take your site, publish it to Netlify as a static site. So there's instructions there as well. And then we have a pre-built, we used httrack, and we created a pre-built toolchain with DevPanel of what you can get with DevPanel, and then we can get into a discussion for that. So here we go. Okay, so let me get into here's a demo project, and here's where we're looking at some Umami projects out there, and I'll build a project from scratch, and I'll show you. So I'm linking my GitLab account. I'm going to use an existing repository. I'm going to search for Umami. I'm going to pick I'm going to pick the master branch as the main branch. Click next and deploy this. And then I'll deploy the master branch. So I linked the repo to created a project from it, and I'll deploy this from scratch. I'll enable. And this is going to go build out a project. And while the project is being built, I'll show you one that's already built and some of the options there. So for the tool chain, here is your, let me go to the repo. Branches here. I'll go over here. I'll sync all the branches. So you'll see the different branches. I'll go into the main branch. Here is the dynamic site from that repo. And you can see this site here. And we'll go look at article. The static version of this site. So you can create multiple versions of the site, but here is a static version of the site as well. I'm going to go through, and so to create a new version, you basically will go here and click on create a new version. And then this fires off the, if you go into the activity, so this, the httrack, if you look at httrack, this is a website scraper. So we're running a website scraper that goes off automatically, puts the content in the bucket, S3 bucket, and builds a CDN on top of it, content delivery network on top of it. So you can see that here. Let me you'll see that there's a CloudFront URL on this site. On the static site, there's a CloudFront URL, and then you can actually give it a custom URL. So we'll open this up as a custom URL. And the page not found. You can still go to that article. So here is our dynamic site. This is the dynamic site. This is the static site. And I'm going to go in and show you how you can make changes to the dynamic site, and then those changes can. So I'm going to go in to, I'm going to do address ULI. This is a VS Code in a browser. So I just opened up VS Code in a browser here, and then I'm going to click on this link, address ULI link. So I'm logged into the dynamic site now. The article. And you can see that on the static site, it says yay for carrots. The dynamic site, it says yay for carrots. I'm going to go in, edit it, and I'm going to change the first line and say hello carrots. And when I update this, it's here. And if I go in here and I refresh this, it says hello carrots here. So you can set it up so that it does incremental updates instead of regenerating the whole site. That's one of the things you can do, is configure it to do incremental updates. And you can also do regeneration of the entire site. So those are things you can do with static sites. You can, this one, you can still see that this is the next version of the static site is still being created. This takes 10, 15, 20 minutes to do. Depending on the size of the site, it can take hours. And it'll regenerate the entire site from scratch, and I'll scrape it. And then, but if you're doing incremental updates, those things can happen really fast. So that's And that was the demo for static sites. Now I just wanted to open it up for just an open discussion for questions, and ask you guys if you have any good projects or use cases for static sites. If you've developed, if you have projects or clients with deprecated sites, or has anyone created static sites before?
What do you do after you launch those static sites as far as debugging JavaScript and whatnot? Do you strip it down in advance, or do you run a crawler across it? What's your approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the things that are not supported are search and forms, right? So outside of that, like, you have to do testing, and you'll have to strip out things that are not working on the static sites. So there will be things that will not work on static sites. So
I guess you could fix the search with a third-party search application like Elk or something.
yeah, like what?
Elk or something, one of the various Solar, whatever.
Yeah, so you can use Solar Search. A lot is Algolia. So if you take a look at Algolia, this is a hosted search engine. So Darren says he's used the Boost module with Drupal.
Nice.
Darren, can you talk more about the Boost module?
Works by generating static pages, and then you put a rule in your .htaccess file, so that, or whatever the equivalent file is for your web server, and it will serve those static pages instead of loading Drupal. And then you just use a crawler to get all the static pages generated, so that Drupal doesn't have.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And does that work with Drupal 7 as well?
Yeah, it works with Drupal 6 and 7.
Oh, very nice. Okay. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, we use httrack because it generally works with all the CMSs and WordPress and everything else. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with httrack, but it's pretty date on this, but it still works, and it works well. So there's a Unix version of it and Linux version of it. It works well. So
Does all the responsive stuff still fire off okay?
it seems to work. Yeah. We haven't had complaints on it or anything, so we haven't seen. What other questions? Or let me go back to this. So so Darren, you've created other static sites before with Boost?
I guess I wouldn't call them static sites, because it's designed to have the dynamic site as a backup, and it refreshes the static pages on a period when they. It could probably be, you could probably just package together all the static pages that were generated and use it as a static site.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And yeah, so okay. Yeah, I guess we'll have to play with it and see. And do you guys, does anyone sites. I know we've talked to some universities and some businesses that have a bunch of, some of them have hundreds, some of them have thousands of old static sites. I mean, old like Drupal 7 sites that are getting deprecated stuff. So have you guys come across any of those kind of sites or projects or clients?
I've come across one, but they have, excuse me, they have a lot of, I'm not a developer, so this isn't my best speaking strength, but they have a lot of custom business logic, I think is how people talk about it, making transferring to a static site really difficult. So I guess this is a question, is like, what would prevent something from being able to convert to a static site?
Yeah, that's a
It's a
good
big
question. Yeah. When you've got business logic, or if you've got like authenticated users and things like that, where people are logging into a site and doing things, right? Then it's not a good candidate for a static site, right? Because now you're essentially disabling the dynamic site. So when you have a brochure site, and it can be a big site, it can be a small site, but it's basically an informational site that is serving pages, that is serving content, that is serving, it can be PDF content as well, or video content, whatever it is. It's serving content. It can be small sites or large sites, but if it's not something that has authenticated traffic, or if it's not something is generating views dynamically, then those would be good candidates for static sites. That's my thinking. What are some of your guys's, what are some other use cases? Can you guys think of other use cases that are that static sites would be good for? Like any other opportunities or ideas on using static sites?
It would be nice if that were just if Drupal were more often used as just an editorial interface to generate static sites.
That is something missing, right? Like a lot of times you use Drupal and then you're publishing the entire Drupal site altogether, and then then you're stuck managing and maintaining the site, updating the patches and things like that. So yeah, if there is a tool chain that allows you to do this, right, that's that
Yeah,
would
is there
be
anything that has like an FTP or SFTP plugin that you can just from within Drupal publish all your static pages somewhere?
Not that I know of off the top. That's a Tome is the closest thing, right? Like it'll allow you to generate the static content, and that's one of the more popular modules that's out there. Tome.
Seen demos, I haven't worked with it directly.
Yeah. So works for Drupal 9 as well, of course, but there are there's two different ways you can use Tome. There's static site generator, then there's Tome sync. So there's tome static and then tome sync. There's a built in, so you can use some client-side search as well with Lunar.js. So you can embed search in there as well.
I've used,
So,
I've used Tome with the Drupal Camp New York City site to archive every year after the event is over. We archive it with Tome and spin up the next year.
yeah, what's your URL for that? Maybe you can bring that up.
Oh, that's a really good, I should know it off the top of my head. It's got, hold on, I'll find it so quick. I'll put it in the chat in a second.
Okay. And then for
Yeah, it's okay. So the live site currently is drupalcamp.nyc, and that will redirect to last year's event, which is at 2021.drupalcamp.nyc. And then if you want to compare that to a Tome one that we've already archived, you just change the 2021 to a 2020, and you'll see that it looks like pretty much the same site.
so this is the live site?
This is the live site. It's actually Drupal, and I have not gotten around to archiving it yet, but the event is over and we have a year to get that done. And then if you change 2021 to 2020, it should be, boy, why does it look odd? That's
It's
not
still
very
loading.
good. It should load lightning fast. It loaded really quickly for me on my computer.
Yeah. Might be my VPN.
It could be that. You might want to hit the reload or something, but that's a little embarrassing. It looks good
No,
on
it's
my
probably
screen.
my VPN.
Yeah. Anyway, that's this one is hosted on GitHub Pages, and the other one is still on Pantheon. So it looks like the pictures are loading now.
Yeah.
But that should be lightning quick, because as we've said, the static sites should be faster than hitting a database and waiting for the CMS to do its thing.
Yeah, it's super fast. And this was originally written in what? In Drupal 9, Drupal 8?
Yeah, the one that's archived to Tome is in Drupal 8.
Yeah.
But Tome works fine with Drupal 9. It should work fine with Drupal 10 when that one comes out.
Yeah.
Matt, and maybe Salim as well, this is an area I have a little less experience in, but I'm just curious how you manage security with the static sites, or if they're even prone to attacks in the first place.
They're really not, because it's kind of like if your site was just on a piece of paper,
yeah,
then nobody would be able to get into, there's no database behind it. You don't have to worry about SQL injection attacks. There's nobody logging into a static site, so there's no passwords that can be compromised. There aren't any privilege escalation exploits against the static site, because nobody's really got, well, I suppose just in the sense that it's running on a web server, then you can still attack the actual host, the web server, and get like a privilege escalation on that. But it's got a much smaller attack surface than a CMS, which has generally got the web server and the database server and a lot of parts in motion that have different vulnerabilities.
Oh, cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and the two things Matt brought up were excellent points here. You know, if you're running it on a server, like there are different ways of running static site, right? So I'm going to go back to that slide here. If you're running the static site like this, then you're not actually using a server that you are managing, right? You're using S3, which is an object storage. It's a bucket. It's a service that Amazon provides, and it's on the cloud. And you know, cloud is somebody else's server, right?
Right.
So you're not managing.
And you can make that read only. So
Right.
it can be set up in such a way that when you deploy to it, nobody can change it. So even if you're worried about somebody getting access, like say you were running it on a regular full LAMP stack and you've got Apache and somebody compromises that somehow, then they can get in and they can edit the HTML of your static HTML site. So if they want to deface your site or something, but that wouldn't be possible in this instance because it'll be a read-only container. It just, you can see what's in it, but you can't write to it at all.
Right. So there's lots of security controls in this way. And this is something that we recommend is not running static sites on your own server. When you're running static sites, put it in a S3 bucket, tighten up the controls, and just serve it using the CDN. And then when you're using a CDN, then your content is globally distributed. So, and it's globally cached, so that when somebody, in some other continent requests your content is transferred to that endpoint, and then it stays there, so that next time it's requested, it's much faster to deliver that content. And then the other thing, the other security question, the other security vulnerability that can come up with static sites is that you can still be subject to DDoS attacks. And with Amazon CDN, like Amazon's CloudFront, for example, it automatically has basic DDoS protection for free. So you get that. You get with the static sites, you get DDoS protection for free. You get basic DDoS protection for free. So that's the other security thing that that'll take servers down. But for static sites, it'll stand up against that. So yeah, but good question.
So this is really useful then, like you're saying, with the use cases for a company that maybe has a brochure style site like we've been talking about, and they can just have that up and exist.
If you have a brochure site, you can do this. We're talking Drupal here specifically, but you can create static sites essentially for WordPress, for Drupal, for anything, right? If you're scraping it and you're presenting it, if it's deprecated, if you don't want to maintain it, if you don't want to keep up with the patches and things like that, just bring it inside the firewall and serve it. But it has to be something that's not. It's got to be a content-heavy site where it's not being. It's not a working site. Like it doesn't have authenticated user traffic. So people are not logging into that site and doing things. And it's not creating views dynamically, and it's not interacting with other systems in the back end dynamically and things like that.
So one could theoretically, host all of their dynamic stuff on like a different portal and have their brochure style site. Let's say it was a brochure style marketing site with a panel or a tab for logging in to an account or something. You could host everything on the static site that was sort of client facing, and then for people that needed to log in, you could have something completely separate, right, for them to log in and work.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's what people do is they'll have, for content editors, right? You'll have a separate login area where content editors can go in and log in, and they'll be accessible through a VPN, or it'll be accessible through through a separate locked area. It can be an htaccess lock or some type of a lock where they have to go through some additional security to get into that site.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they update it, they can regenerate that static site, or the static site is generated nightly or something like that. So you can have two different versions of your site essentially, and you can have them active simultaneously as well.
Yeah.
But the public facing site can be the static site, and then the internal site is the one that's the dynamic site and available and open to content editors. Yeah.
Well, I believe we do something of the sort like that at Esteemed, where we have our front end with the blog, and then I write content go into forestry, which is built on Jekyll, and put the content in there, and then
Yeah.
that displays on the static site after.
Yeah.
Yes, Jekyll is definitely a static site generator.
Okay.
Yeah. So unless there are other questions, I think we're done. Do you guys have are there questions or any other discussion points you guys want to talk about? Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rachel. Okay, there's my contact information. If you guys need to reach me, you can definitely reach me there. And then I will get this out. I will put the slides together and some notes together for Matt as well, so that he can post that.
And Slim, do you have any upcoming conference appearances or?
I'm speaking at DrupalCon for about serverless Drupal, how to set up a serverless Drupal, and the benefits of serverless and how to set that up and everything. So that's coming up for DrupalCon. How many people are going to DrupalCon? I am. Okay, good. Darren's going. Peter's going. Who else is going? Matt, are you guys going? Matt and Matt?
I don't think this year.
No?
No, but we were accepted into the content library, so we'll need to record and post that for after the conference. I think Chris might actually go
Okay.
because Dory is going, and they'll
Okay.
sync up there.
Okay. Yeah, so Lorraine, I don't want to get this wrong. Isaiah, is it? Did I get that right? And then Rachel. Oh, I got it right. Okay. Are you guys going? And I was supposed to go to Florida Drupal Camp as well, which is coming up. Anyone going to Florida Drupal Camp?
Rick Torzinski will be there, and he'll be presenting on.
From your team?
Yeah. Well, he's not on the internal team, but he's one of our favorite conference speakers, and so he'll be giving a presentation on, Rasa and creating chatbots with machine learning and AI for Drupal applications. So that should be
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
that should be a really interesting talk.
Yeah. Okay, hi Rachel. Okay, so I'm new, it's why I don't have questions. Okay, thank you for this information. Okay, not sure if I can go to DrupalCon. Well, okay. No, it is in person this year. So they're doing it in person. It's in Portland. I don't know where you're based, but it is in Portland. So if you're near Portland, it might be good to attend. Where are you based? In California and Africa. Oh my God! Wow. Okay. Well, thanks for attending. UCSC, University of
Santa Cruz, maybe.
Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Santa Cruz. Oh, yeah. I went to Berkeley, and UC Santa Cruz was my first choice. That was years and years and years ago. My dad forced me to go to Berkeley, so yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So that's yeah. So sorry. No, it was good. Yeah, I had fun. I met my beautiful wife over there. So my first day at Berkeley. So all right. So that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me or hit me up on the esteemed Slack. I'm there as well. So and then yeah, and then oh, if you need help setting up static Esteemed, and you know, there are folks over here at Esteemed that can help you with that. So yeah, more than happy to help you with that. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much for coming, and see you on Slack, and talk to you guys later.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah. See ya. Bye.